Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Rocco, and this module is actually part of our training for AI design and training basics. So throughout this course, we're going to learn how to use AI-powered tools in order to enhance your training and promote inclusivity. So we wanted to start off by just saying, why accessibility, disability, and learning differences matter to you and why they should matter to you. This course helps you become the kind of teacher, trainer, or tech user who includes more people in their learning process. This isn't about checking boxes. It's about understanding people, tools, and choices that change lives, including your own. So why this matters for you? Maybe you want to connect with more people, build tools and content that are usable by all, and meet your goals faster, better, and more meaningfully in the spaces that you have. What we're really trying to do is create environments of success and comfort for people that they can learn in a way that fits their learning style. And throughout this course, you're going to learn different tactics to be able to implement accessible and universal design approaches and using AI-powered tools in order to help you accomplish that in a way that's going to be meaningful, not only for you, but the people that you're working with. So what is accessibility really about? We want to focus on thriving, full participation, and engagement with people. When you're creating a training, you want to ensure that the person is making sure the material is meaningful to that person. It's not just utilizing something that you have to do within your company or organization or classroom. You want that person to take this information and use it beyond the training itself. Because if you don't do that, your training had failed. You want to make sure that this generalizes, that they can use these skills in a way that fits within their learning style and alter it over time, because within those specific alterations, sometimes we call those idiosyncratic alterations, you see that your own process then becomes better, becomes more accessible, becomes more representative and more engaging with the people that you're working with. So you have to expect that difference, building spaces that adapt with people, building spaces that people feel comfortable to make those changes, to challenge those things that you are trying to put into place, be it the content, the way you're approaching it, and so on. So this course then also talks about it's more than the basics. It goes beyond contrast and captions. When we talk about accessibility, yes, there are guidelines associated with that for web accessibility, but accessibility isn't just about the way you're interacting with the things in front of you. It's what you are actually learning, what you're actually doing in this particular case. So what are you trying to teach? What are those skills that you're trying to teach? And what are those repertoires that people can use and adapt in ever-changing situations? Because you can't train every single thing that might happen in someone's life. You help that person feel empowered to find the answer. You help those folks feel like they can ask questions. They can try without the fear of total failure. A safe space to learn, a safe space to engage in. So when we're talking about what makes something accessible, it's not just about the way we're engaging. You look at this screen here. You have logos in the corners, you have pictures, you have a pyramid, and so on. But we have to be aware that accessibility also means, is this content relevant and representative and engaging for the individuals that we're working with? So what is disability in general? There's a few different models that are out there, and there's many even beyond the ones that are shown here, but there's three that I want you to be aware of, and I think something that's going to be more pertinent to the types of trainings that you might do. The medical model of disability is focusing more on reducing the impairment and quote-unquote fixing situations for someone. So if an individual has a particular disability or an impairment that is medically based and can be directly treated, a medical model would be, well, we are going to treat this particular thing. Now, this isn't necessarily inherently bad. If you have chronic pain, having something to treat that chronic pain is probably a good thing for most folks. Where the medical model starts failing, though, is when you have individuals with learning disabilities like myself, or you have individuals with developmental disabilities or cognitive disabilities trying to, quote-unquote, fix that person, forcing that individual to fit within the society and the expectations that are within that society. That's something we have to be careful about. That's something we have to not be thinking about as we're doing this, right? So What is disabling for the person in a medical model is their impairment itself. It's very focused on the individual and the individual changing in the environment that they have. The social model of disability, however, is how the environment fails the individual or disables that person from engaging in the environment. Take an individual who's in a wheelchair. If there's only stairs leading up to get into a particular building, that person is literally disabled from getting into the building. However, if there's a ramp or a lift or an elevator or other tool or equipment that maybe I didn't mention here, if there's something that the person can then enter into the building, they are no longer disabled from entering the building. Now, that's a physical built space example, but you can also do these things where educational practices are more accessible. You're creating your trainings where, what if someone has a lower reading level than maybe the person who created the training? There's a lot of complicated topics out there, and the more you get into your field, if you have decades of experience, you have learned and picked up lingo and different ways to talk about things. But sometimes translating that back to someone who's learning this in the different way than you did, who's learning this for the first time, they're not going to have the same jargon that you will. They might not approach things the same way that you will. For all my teachers and professors out there who went through schooling and have undergraduate, graduate, doctoral degrees, you had been a professional student for an incredibly long time. And the further and further away you get from that graduation, you might say, well, back in my day, people had to learn like this and they had to, quote unquote, just do it. But that's not the space that we live in today. We have more technology. We have more AI-powered things, and people are using these. And you yourself can use them in a way to help empower others to use appropriately. And when I say appropriately, I mean within that person's bounds on how they can use it for their own lives. And then the final model of disability I want to cover, which we have some publications about as well, is the disability critical race theory. And this really looks at how cultural and disability identity affect environmental access to things. Now, that's a very broad category, and there will be more videos on this in the future as well. However, what we look at within disability is if you are from a marginalized group and you have a disability, or being labeled as having a disability, or you have your own disability identity that you share with others, that might gain or lose different access to things like education, medical care, and so on. So the reason why I'm sharing this is what is disability in general is because even if the individual doesn't have a disability identity or a particular label, legal or otherwise, this is still something to consider on how people learn. How are people different? And you should consider this as well. There are millions of people on this planet that have disability identities now. And chances are you are going to come in contact with people that are going to need different learning styles than the ones that maybe you are used to. You can't just assume the way that you are approaching things is the right way. You have to ask the people that you're working with. And throughout this training, I'm going to teach you tactics on how to do that. How do you consult with people with lived experience in the communities you're trying to serve? So your learning style then is valid. People learn in different ways. There's no single style that's better than the other. Knowing your learning style helps you choose better tools, understanding others, and design content that reaches more people. There's a little chart here, and you can read through this on your own time as well, but I'm going to pick out a few. On the left-hand side, there's the learning style, so there's things like visual, auditory, reading, and so on. What works well within that style and what might not work well for that style. So let's take myself, for example. I am more of a visual learner. Auditory information can be very difficult for me, so I like to have more visuals associated with it, so that comprehension component can be difficult. So what works well is diagrams, charts, videos, color-coded notes, slide decks, how to create little quizzes that talk through these examples here, and show visually how a process potentially works. It's kind of like a little visual algorithm. And those are things that work really, really well for me personally. What doesn't work, though, is long blocks of text without images or layout cues or so on. And I know that might seem a little hypocritical here because this slide has a lot of words. However, this is used as more of a note component here. And I want you to think about, well, how are people learning in the company that you're working with? It's hard to create something that's going to work for every single person. So asking ahead of time, maybe doing a test run of something first to see how people interact with how you are delivering this information is going to be useful, right? But you also have to be careful because you don't want people to accidentally be forced to self-identify as having a disability or what have you. So maybe asking, what is the best way that you learn? What tools do you need to be most successful? What types of things have you encountered in the past that has been most successful for you when you're learning something new? So we learn differently for a variety of different reasons. Maybe our background is different, and when backgrounds meet that might not share the same values or approaches or resources, that can be very difficult. Maybe your language, culture, maybe you have a trauma experience, maybe you have other personal experiences coming into a particular situation that either is hindered by or amplified within the environment that you live in. If everybody is speaking the same language and comes from the same culture, it might be easier to create a training that way when you have something that's more homogenous. Homogenous meaning everybody kind of has similar backgrounds and so on. But if you have multiple folks with different backgrounds and different lived experiences and different lives, this becomes more hard, right? This becomes harder to do. There's the thing that, we kind of call braining, quote unquote, but this is where that neurodivergence and natural variations come in. So even beyond some of the more cultural components and lifetime things, sometimes we call that ontological, if you want to know the word for that. Sometimes the way that we are built and the way that our brains work make some traditional tactics not as effective. So for me, I am not very good at rote memorization, especially for the function of that. I can say, oh, here's the word, here's the definition, go for it, and then you can ask me to give you a definition that's similar to that, or give another example of that. That doesn't work well for me. So there's natural variations in the way that people are coming into your space, that they are having within their biology, right? But that's not to say that just because someone has a particular impairment or a particular quote-unquote disability, or they're built differently, that doesn't mean that they're inherently bad. And that doesn't mean that they're inherently flawed. And that's something that we have to be careful with. Because there's just different ways to approach things, right? And this all then boils down to the motivation. What are the personal values that this person has? What drives them to be able to do the things that they're doing? What drives you? Why are you even training this stuff in the first place? What's the utility of that? Right? So all of these factors come into play, not only for the people that you're trying to teach, but for yourself as well. So what happens when we don't design for differences? People are excluded and they're left out or misjudged or unsupported, not because of ability, but because of poor design. If we're not creating an environment of success for people and someone fails, whose fault is that? It's not the individual. It's the environment. If you're set up for failure, you're going to fail. What is the real world impact? You might have a brilliant student with ADHD that can't show what they know in a timed test. We might have to have different ways to approach things, multiple means of expression, representation, engagement. There could be a communication divide, promoting more ableism, saying that disability is not good, right? There's disconnect, there's discomfort, and so on. So if we don't design for those differences, we're excluding people. We're creating terrible real-world impacts for individuals that could have been successful if they had minor alterations to the way they're being taught and the way that they're learning. And to be included in that learning, asked, how did this work for you? Just because you have a chart or data showing that this person can do these things, if they're not feeling good about that, and if they're depressed and if they're sad, this is something that is very, very detrimental and ultimately leads to outcomes of failure. Ignoring the differences hurts outcomes for you and the learners. So simply saying something like, I don't see difference, that's not good enough. You have to honor those differences. You have to understand differences in learning and incorporate those types of differences into the trainings that you're doing. Because if you don't do that, you're setting yourself up for failure. So a better way to build, we can do inclusive design to be more essential. So not extra features, but like core requirements. How are we starting with inclusivity? How are we starting with accessibility at first? Right from the beginning, before we even put the whole program together, what are we trying to teach? How do we reduce the barriers so that there's fewer of them, removing those obstacles or limiting those obstacles to prevent participation and productivity? We want to increase participation and productivity. We want happier users, people that feel like this is worth their time. Just because a training might be free, if it's taking up someone's time, that is someone's most valuable asset. We only have so much time on this earth, right? So if you're taking up someone's time in a way that's not going to be useful for them in any sense of the word, and if they don't feel like this is something that's motivating or values driven for that person, your training might be set up for failure. And then we can use smarter tools, accessible technology, adaptive tech, and AI development in order to do these things. We can have these components close these gaps of learning. So what this course is about then is those tools and those mindsets, inclusive thinking, how to think with access and inclusion in mind from the beginning. From the beginning. What are those learning objectives? How are we going to achieve those learning objectives and so on? And then understanding the needs of the people that you're working with. What different people might need to succeed. Maybe someone needs higher contrast. Maybe someone needs more time. Maybe someone needs multiple ways to show that they know this information. It might not just be multiple choice. Assignments, posters, videos, so on. What do people need in order to express how they know something? What's the practical applications then of how do we actually apply this? How do you turn an idea into real decisions and then building content tech and trainings associated with that? So within this course, we really teach you how to do that, how to create your own process as a trainer trying to train other people, and as an educator trying to educate other people, as a designer trying to design for more accessible spaces for other people as well, within your own tool set. So understanding and reflecting upon your own learning style is going to be a hugely important piece throughout this time. So let's begin. I want you to be a thoughtful designer, create with attention and awareness. That helps you be a compassionate leader, to lead with empathy and understanding and flexibility with the people that you work with. And to be an effective communicator, reach more people meaningfully in the way that they want to be reached, not just the way you think someone should be reached. So throughout this course, I challenge you, reflect on your own learning styles and your